December the 4th, 1872. Roughly 400 miles east of the Azores, the crew of the brigantine Dei Gratia sight a ship running wild under short, ragged sail, yawing across the swell as though no one stands at her wheel. They watch her stagger for the better part of 2 hours. No flag answers their signal. No figure appears on deck. Captain David Morehouse lowers a boat and sends his mate, Oliver Deveau, across, and Deveau climbs aboard into a silence that has outlived everyone who has ever tried to explain it. The ship is the Mary Celeste, and Morehouse knows her master by name. By most accounts, Benjamin Briggs had dined at Morehouse's table in New York only days before the two ships sailed for the same ocean. Now Deveau finds no one left to greet him. Below, as the story has been told for 150 years, a meal sits half-eaten on the cabin table, a cup still faintly warm. A child's things lie out mid-play. In the sewing room, a garment sits under the needle, as if the hand guiding it simply lifted away and never came back. The galley fire, tellings insist, has not yet gone properly cold. Nothing is broken, nothing looted. The ship's single small boat is gone, and with it Briggs, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew. 10 people, gone from a vessel that by every outward sign meant to come right back for its breakfast. The ship is properly named the Mary Celeste, a 2-masted brigantine 99 feet long, built to carry cargo across the Atlantic and back, nothing more glamorous than that. 11 weeks before the sighting, on November the 7th, 1872, she cleared New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy, her hold packed with 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. At her wheel was Benjamin Spooner Briggs, 37 years old, a part owner of the ship and one of the most trusted captains sailing out of Massachusetts. He had brought his wife Sarah aboard, and their daughter Sophia, not yet 2, and a crew of 7 he had chosen carefully, men he judged sober and capable for a winter crossing. This is the ship America and Britain would spend the next century and a half arguing about, in newspapers, in courtrooms, in 100 retellings that rarely agree with each other and rarely agree with the record. 10 people sailed for Italy. Something happened to them on the open Atlantic, somewhere between the last page of the log and the morning Deveau climbed over the rail. The ship herself had a history worth knowing before her most famous chapter. Launched in 1861 at Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, under British registration, she began life as the Amazon, and her luck was bad from the very first week. Her first captain, Robert McClellan, fell ill and died within days of taking command. The ship that inherited his name went on to collide with another vessel in the Bay of Fundy, catch fire during a refit, and in 1867 run aground in a gale in Cape Breton's Cow Bay, wrecked badly enough that her owners gave her up as a loss. A salvager bought the hulk for a fraction of her worth, rebuilt her, and sold her into American hands, who renamed her Mary Celeste in 1869. Sailors of the age noticed these things. A ship that killed its first captain and wrecked twice before its 10th birthday earned a reputation before it earned a new name, and more than one crewman later claimed he had turned down a berth aboard her rather than test it. Briggs did not share that superstition, or did not let it show. He came from a family of sea captains going back generations. He had commanded ships since his 20s without incident, and he had just bought a share in this one because the price was right and the trade to Italy paid well. Bringing Sarah and Sophia along was not unusual for a man in his position. Wives and children rode along on long merchant crossings often enough, treated almost as a working holiday. Briggs had every reason to expect a routine 6 weeks at sea. The Mary Celeste cleared New York on November the 7th, delayed 2 days by weather, and by most accounts Briggs and Morehouse had shared a friendly dinner just before both crews sailed, master to master, each bound for the same stretch of ocean roughly a week apart. Briggs wrote home in good spirits. Sarah's letters to her mother, sent back with the harbor pilot, described a smooth start and a happy, well-provisioned ship. For 2.5 weeks, nothing about the voyage stood out from 1,000 others like it. Then on November the 25th, someone aboard the Mary Celeste made the last entry her log would ever record, placing the ship near Santa Maria Island in the Azores, sailing well, weather fair. After that morning, the log falls silent. 10 days pass. 10 days in which the Mary Celeste kept moving, kept a bearing, crossed roughly 400 miles of open Atlantic on courses someone, or something, was still choosing for her until the lookout aboard the Dei Gratia raised her on the horizon and could not make sense of what he saw. News of the derelict reached the world within days, and the world could not get enough of it. Every newspaper on 2 continents ran its own version of the empty ship, and every version added a little more color than the last. One paper had the crew seized by pirates who could not resist a boarding but somehow left every coin and every barrel untouched. Another floated a giant squid risen from the deep to drag 10 people over the rail without capsizing the boat that carried them. A third insisted the crew, driven mad or drunk on the cargo in the hold, had turned on each other and gone over the side in a single murderous night. Sailors along the docks of a dozen ports swapped theories over their grog, each stranger than the last, and the ship that carried them slipped quietly into legend, becoming in the popular telling a byword for the sea taking people whole and leaving their unfinished lives behind as evidence. She would be invoked for decades afterward, whenever another ship or plane went missing in open water, long before anyone had drawn a triangle on a map to explain it. A dozen years on, the case gained its most famous chronicler. In January of 1884, a gripping first-hand account appeared in a respected British magazine, narrated by a supposed survivor who described the horror aboard in vivid, specific detail, a religious fanatic among the crew, a struggle, a fate for every soul aboard spelled out at last. Readers devoured it. An American newspaper ran it straight as breaking news. For the first time, the Mary Celeste had an ending, dramatic, satisfying, and told with the total confidence of an eyewitness. And that ending is the one most people who have ever heard of this ship actually remember, whether they know its source or not. The ship's own luck, meanwhile, kept curdling. She passed through half a dozen more owners after 1872, and captains who took her on reported one misfortune after another: fires, near wrecks, cargo disasters, until sailors along the Atlantic seaboard were calling her cursed outright, and some masters refused a command aboard her at any price. By the 20th century, she had become shorthand. Any ship found empty, any pilot vanished from a cockpit with the engine still running, drew the same 2 words from reporters looking for a headline: the Mary Celeste. 100 years after Briggs sailed her out of New York, she was still doing the one thing she had never stopped doing since that December morning, making people need an explanation badly enough to invent one. That is the Mary Celeste, as the world has told her story for 150 years, breakfast steaming, ghosts implied, a squid or a mutiny waiting behind whichever curtain suits the teller. The finding is documented. The log's last entry is documented. Where the rest of it came from is a different question, and it has a paper trail of its own. Set the legend down. Open the file. Start with the ending everyone remembers because it is the easiest thread to pull. The gripping first-hand account of 1884 was fiction, published anonymously in the Cornhill magazine under the title J. Hurback UK Jeff Son's Statement, written by a young doctor trying to break into writing named Arthur Conan Doyle, more than a decade before he invented Sherlock Holmes. Doyle changed the captain's name, changed the crew, changed the ship's own name from Mary Celeste to Marie Celeste, the small misspelling that still trips up search engines and quiz shows today, and invented a whole religious fanatic subplot to give the case a villain. When the Boston Herald ran it as genuine news, and when readers on both sides of the Atlantic kept treating it as the true account for years afterward, the Gibraltar official who had actually investigated the real disappearance felt compelled to say so in public. Frederick Solly Flood, the Crown's own advocate at the 1872 hearing, called Doyle's story, in his own words, a fabrication from beginning to end. The warm cup, the half-eaten meal, the sewing left under the needle, the fire not yet cold, none of it appears in the sworn testimony taken at Gibraltar. It appears in Doyle's prose and in the century of retellings that borrowed his details without borrowing his byline. The real inventory, taken down by the man who actually climbed aboard, tells a stranger and considerably less tidy story. Oliver Deveau gave his account under oath, not around a dockside table, and it survives in the Gibraltar court record. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy, riding with about 3.5 feet of water in her hold, not a flooding amount, but not nothing either. One of her 2 pumps had been taken apart, its pipe removed and left useless. The sounding rod, the simple stick sailors use to check how much water sits in the bilge, lay out on deck rather than stowed, as though someone had just used it and never put it away. The forward hatch cover and one of the main hatch covers were off the ship entirely. The ship's papers were gone, every one of them except the captain's log and the log slate, which were left behind almost as if on purpose. The compass was found broken, knocked from its mount, and the ship's single small boat, her yawl, was missing not because it had been smashed or swept away, but because someone had lowered it properly, using its own rigging the way a crew lowers a boat when it means to come back. 6 months of food and water still sat in the hold, untouched. A sailor's oilskin boots and a pipe lay where their owners had left them. Of the 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol below deck, 9 were later found completely empty. Nothing about this list describes a ship abandoned mid-breakfast. It describes a crew that made a hurried, deliberate, and ultimately fatal decision to leave. That decision is exactly what the Gibraltar hearing spent 4 months failing to explain. Frederick Solly Flood did not believe in an accident. He argued for mutiny, for a drunken crew turning violent, for piracy, and eventually for a conspiracy between the Mary Celeste's own people and the crew of the Dei Gratia to split an insurance payout built partly around a stained sword found aboard that closer examination never confirmed was blood at all. None of it held up. The cargo was industrial alcohol, foul and dangerous to drink, which undercuts the drunken mutiny theory on its own terms. Nothing valuable was missing, which undercuts piracy. And no evidence ever tied Morehouse's crew to any wrongdoing beyond bad timing and a friendship with the wrong captain. When Judge Cochrane finally ruled in March of 1873, he awarded the Dei Gratia's crew salvage of £1,700, roughly 1/6 of the insured value of ship and cargo, an unusually stingy figure that reads less like a verdict than like a court that still had questions it could not answer and wanted the world to know it. No one was ever charged with anything. The wilder theories the newspapers had floated back in 1872, the giant squid, the murderous crew, kept a separate life of their own long after Gibraltar closed its file, retold in pulp sea mystery magazines through the early 20th century and revived by paperback writers whenever the ghost ship genre needed a reliable name to put on a cover. They sold books. They never once matched a splinter of the evidence. Weigh it now in 3 piles, the way the file demands. First, the physical record. Seaworthy ship, disassembled pump, sounding rod out, hatch covers off. A boat lowered deliberately, papers gone, but the log left behind. That much is solid and has been solid since 1872. Second, the reconstruction. The industrial alcohol was shipped in red oak barrels rather than the tighter white oak more commonly used for the cargo, and red oak is porous enough to weep vapor. In 2005, the chemist Andrea Sell built a scaled model and showed that a fast flash of alcohol vapor in a sealed hold can blow hatch covers open with real force and a visible flash of flame, yet burn out too quickly to scorch the wood, answering the objection that always dogged this theory, that no burn marks were ever found aboard. A separate investigation that same decade, led by filmmaker Anne McGregor with the oceanographer Phil Richardson, reconstructed the ship's likely drift and argued Briggs's own navigation may have placed him farther from land than he actually was, a misjudgment that could turn a moment's fear into a fatal decision to take to the yawl. Third, the theories with no real support. That Briggs himself arranged a fraud, though nothing in his finances suggests desperation. That his crew mutinied, though their cargo was nearly undrinkable. That pirates or a sea creature took them, though nothing was stolen and nothing was damaged in any way consistent with an attack. The piles are not close to even. One of them is evidence. The others are what people needed the evidence to say. So, the verdict, held open exactly where the evidence holds it open. Nothing in the record supports a curse, a monster, or a massacre. What the record supports is quieter and stranger in its own right. A well-built ship, sailed by a careful and experienced captain carrying a cargo that likely leaked just enough dangerous vapor to frighten 10 people into a small boat on the open Atlantic in late November, tied off or trailing behind their own ship, waiting out a danger that may have passed within the hour. If the line parted in the swell, or was cut loose in a moment of panic, the Mary Celeste sailed on alone and unmanned, and the yawl, with everyone Briggs loved and commanded aboard it, was left behind on an ocean with no way to call for help. The ship herself outlived them by 13 years, and her own ending held no mystery at all. In January of 1885, Her final captain ran her deliberately onto a reef off Haiti, an ordinary insurance fraud dressed up as one more bad luck wreck, and she burned where she sat. A search team announced they had found her bones on that reef in 2001, though the wood they raised has never been conclusively matched to her keel. Benjamin Briggs read the ocean carefully for 20 years and misjudged it once. The world has spent 150 years refusing to accept that the misjudging could be the whole story.